Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now, here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi, everyone. It's Roxanne Derhodge of the Authentic Living with Roxanne. This week, I have a colleague, Sharon Babineau, with me. Sharon has mindfulness specialty, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So, Sharon, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So, I'm gonna read a bit about Sharon's background, which is quite extensive, and I think the bio oftentimes does not do the guest justice because there's so much that oftentimes people have done. So Sharon is a corporate wellness facilitator. She's a decorated military soldier and an inspirational speaker, and also she's a TEDX speaker, and she's also an author. She has trained in mindfulness, and she's a mindfulness expert and has been doing this work, I would say, for decades now. And she was on a path to learning about self-care because she unfortunately had two significant losses with her husband and her daughter to illnesses that really kind of put her on that path. And she's been involved with the University of Toronto Continuing Ed with their mindfulness program there, and the applied mindfulness mediation program. And she's also co-facilitated several courses. And I know mindfulness is something that in corporate North America, it's something that we're constantly trying to find new perspectives on it and how it can help us stay focused and obviously more productive and more connected. So Sharon, thanks so much for coming on to share your expertise.
Thank you. Yes, delighted.
So let's just kind of jump right into it and talk about kind of your path on mindfulness. And because like I said, so much of, I know with you as a keynote speaker and myself, that's something that is often asked for by companies now. So kind of share with us your path and how you kind of got involved where you're kind of steeped in mindfulness today.
Yeah, so, well, I definitely have to go back to the personal side. Where my journey started was after the loss of my daughter, Maddie. So she was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 12 and battled it bravely for 3 years. But sadly, we lost her at the age of 15 at a much too young age to lose any child. And one of the things that she left as a personal legacy to me was a promise that I had to make to her, and that was to be happy. To be happy after she passed. And for me, that was something that just seemed absolutely impossible. Like, how could I be happy? How could I even get up the next day? And it was something that really challenged me. And I intuitively, I guess, started to just try to find things that I was grateful for. So every morning I'd get up, and sometimes it's like slim pickings. There wasn't a lot going on in my life. I'd lost my job, lost my husband, my daughter, but I had my son, and my son needed a mom who was happy. And so I just knew I had to figure out what this new happiness would look like. And so that started with a little bit of meditation every day, just finding gratitude for him, for myself, for the beautiful experiences I'd had with my daughter, with my husband, the lessons learned. And from there, I wanted to make them proud, really. And how can I get back into the world again and be productive? And I came across a woman who was teaching a mindfulness class. And so, I mean, I took her class. There's a part of me, because I'm a soldier, that, was always worried there was a bit of woo-woo to it. But, I soon learned that there's science that backs everything that mindfulness shares. And so I started meditating, and I started working on my mind. The biggest part of that was, bringing a positive mindset into my day-to-day life. And what I learned was it's something that, for some of us, it doesn't happen naturally because we've overcome many, many challenges in our lives. So, just practicing every day, studying, started reading books, and that was where the path started. So, and then studying, that's the big part, yes.
So for the average person that may not understand mindfulness, and on the media, and you'll hear lots of things about, define mindfulness as best as you can for, say, someone that maybe has never kind of got the concept. How would you define it?
Okay. So mindfulness is paying attention in the present moment on purpose and without judgment. And so, I mean, that's a lot to unpack, but it's really about really being present. So not being thrown in the past of all our worries, not being focused of the what ifs that are coming up in the future, and just really having that presence in the moment, giving full attention, not wishing things were another way. Yeah, I think maybe does that help?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So, I often think that when things are going really well for us, it's really kind of easy to apply those concepts, right? But when you're talking about something as devastating as losing, a husband and a child, and and you're looking at cancer. That was what she had died of. That's pretty, tough. When you see someone kind of go through that process. So, how did you start to apply some of these things? Because I'm thinking you're grieving, you're in the throes of it, yeah. Sharon. And I can think of, in my years of dealing with people that have gone through grief, it's hard to sometimes get out of bed, much less, brush your hair and make sure, everything's done, right? Because you're in that deep state of mourning.
Yeah.
How did you start to, or maybe what are some of the things that people could start doing, regardless of the mourning state that they're in?
Okay. Well, I mean, grief is something that, can't be rushed. We know that. It's a process that we go through. And some of the mindfulness techniques I just found really, really helped. And I'll give you one example. There was one day, about 3 months after Maddie passed away, and my son came out and asked me if it was okay for him to go out and play. And, I was a little surprised. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And he's like, well, Mom, you're so sad. I don't want to leave you alone. And it was in that moment that I understood what my daughter said when she asked me to be happy, because my son needed somebody to be happy. And so that day I said to him, no, I'm okay. Go out and play, and don't worry, I'm going to be fine. And as I sent him out, I shut that door. And in that moment, I literally, for the first time, and this soldier warrior with all her armor went down on her knees and said, I want to surrender. I want to surrender all these arrows that are pierced in my heart that are causing so much grief, the shame, the blame, the wishing things were different. And sometimes some of those arrows, like, we put them in ourselves, and so we're the only ones who could take them out. So there was this sort of sense of just wanting some freedom to surrender. And I guess, which is such a strange word for me, to say I can surrender this and let it go. And that, I think, really opened the doors. And so that's when, again, the studying of the mindfulness came up. And so I would say, how is mindfulness helping for people who are grieving? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think for one, it allows you to be with those feelings, because if we can't be with those feelings, so I had to really allow the sadness to move through me without sort of like just swallowing it, and creating this heaviness, to just and so some of it was the just sitting, allowing it to arise. I know this is something that's not easy if you are in deep grief, but for many of us, that's something that we can do. And then just some of the positive psychology, that I've studied a bit at the university, and
It's tough, right? Because we recognize, like I've gone through I lived through a major loss a couple of years ago, and prior to that, I hadn't really been through much of a loss. I've been through losses of my grandparents and things like that, but nothing significant. And I remember finally being struck by how numb I became right at right as you find out, and it was a sudden death also.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting, getting the phone call, not believing it, and sitting in the corner of my dressing room, just bawling my eyes out, trying to kind of get space and time again, right? And then eventually, went into kind of automatic pilot to do everything I needed to do. But clearly what you're saying is that it's about not shutting that down. It's about, I would play music. It was my younger sister. I would play music that would bring up the memories of her. And, at times I would be fine. And then at times out of nowhere, I would get a piece of music. You used to like Boy George when we were like 14. And then I purposely would sometimes play the music to be able to bring up the emotion. And I think what you're saying is a kind of traditional philosophy on the Western world. People will ask you how you're doing for a bit. And then it's kind of like, if it's been 3 months, it's kind of like, oh, how you doing? And the perception is that you should answer, I'm okay. And truly, most of us are not okay. We're functioning, but we're still feeling the pain. So what you're saying is that mindfulness is just about feeling the pain and sitting with it and not shutting it off to really distract yourself from what's happening.
Yeah, and I mean, and that works for all aspects of our life, just sitting with disappointment, sitting with it's practicing life, like I like to say, just in the safety of your own room, your own chair, to sit and, disappointments that come up, to be able to just, be with it instead of like, playing it over and over again in a way that's can be really destructive. It's like just an acknowledgement, I suppose, that it's happened. And then depending if it's a relationship or something, that's something you can always, what do you want it to be in the future? How do you want to change it? You can practice that in your mind too. Meeting the person, what are you going to say? How are you going to react when they, say something that hurts your feelings? That we can practice real life, in the privacy of our own space. And then when we go out and we're in these situations, I think, with the neural pathways, right? When you understand a little bit about creating new neural pathways in the brain. I know for myself, because my daughter was sick for 3 years, it was a long drawn out illness. And so in my mind, I kept saying, I know, I just knew she was going to die. It was just something, and I feel horrible even admitting that, but that's what drove me. It drove me to find the best doctors. It drove me to do everything. It drove me to put my life on hold and care for her. That urgency of that. But I just that constant fear cycling in my brain. It created a neural pathway that took me to a very dark place. And so it was after her passing and the promise and everything. It's like, what I didn't realize I was doing as I sat in practice and I sat and would reflect You could say meditate, mindfulness, reflection, same thing. Sit and reflecting on stuff, and then finding the gratitude for the good things and making plans for good things to happen in my life, creating a new neural pathway, because we know that we say negative things stick like Velcro and positive like Teflon, right? It slides right off, right? So, we have this bank account of negative things in our life and positive. And although my understanding is we have more positive things in our lives, we remember the negative things more deeply. They get burned into the long-term memory because of the emotion that is there. So so we have these, it looks like one side's on overdraft, and one's completely full. But if we really step back and look, there are a lot more positive, but we have to pay more attention to them. We kind of blow them off, someone says, oh, you have a nice dress. And you go, oh, I bought this on sale, this old thing, it's, it's like a sieve, these beautiful, good things that happen to us are just slipping through our fingers. We remember all the red lights, we always say we were in the longest lineup at the grocery store, but we forget the person who smiled at us. So part of mindfulness allows us to do things like, I know whether you're journaling, like for me, journaling, and like I said, doing some reflection meditations, and just really, and it takes a conscious effort to be positive. And so I had been rewired to the dark, and it wasn't a quick fix. It took a long time, a year or 2 years to come over to be more positive. And again, it's not a natural thing for a lot of us. It's something that we have to really work on. It's kind of not fair, and that's the way the brain, we have the negativity bias, because that was the survival, right? Going back to prehistoric days, if you made a mistake, you would die. But if something nice happened to you, that wasn't a big deal back then. So we're wired for that, our brain, so yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about if let's say somebody's never tried it before, and
Okay.
and what are some basic things that you can do to kind of start? Like you talked already about just being grateful, right? So I often say to people, sometimes I close my eyes again, and then I, if a negative thought comes up, I will flip it, right? And then I'll say, okay, I'm going to close my eyes again. I'm going to try this again. And then I open my eyes and I try to, remember something positive. I'm looking outside into my, the forest when I open my eyes. I'm breathing, sometimes, just going to some of the basic things. So you talked about gratitude. You talked about really the negativity bias, right? So as human beings, fight, flight, or freeze, we had to survive. We did that. And now, so our instinct biologically is to go back to preserve ourselves. So even kind of trying to flip, it into a positive. What are some other things? You talked a little bit about reflection. So in order to reflect, do you suggest breathing, or what kind of things do you kind of suggest for people to get into a reflective state?
Yeah. So if we talk about having a mindfulness practice for that, well, first off, that you could do it anywhere. That's a great thing about mindfulness. You can do it on the bus, you can do it walking, you can do it sitting. You really don't, you don't need fancy footwear and fancy clothes. And we know the benefits over 8 weeks, can actually, change the brain, which is pretty exciting to know, like 5 to 10 minutes could do that. So sitting wherever, in their home, whether they find a place in their office or whatever. And like we said, first focusing on the breath, and why the breath? Because we can only breathe in the present moment, right? So as long as you use it as an anchor, so even if you're excited or nervous, or just before you have a difficult phone call to make, just take a breath and check in, like what is going on, check into your body, do a quick little body scan. Am I feeling tension somewhere in my body? And then just go to that area and just breathe a bit. So a simple little thing like that. Again, as you were saying, just having positive reflections. You can do sending loving kindness out to other people, to the world. Like that's like one of the best things you can do to help heal yourself, is putting that focus maybe out there. on those that you love, your friends, your community, or even just to absolutely everybody. So the breath, checking in on the body, so enhancing a positive quality. Again, doing a reframing or a pre-framing is another mindfulness that you could do. As you meditate, as you first learn to meditate, maybe your first couple of weeks. So when I say using your breath as the anchor, that's just sitting there quietly with maybe your eyes closed or a soft gaze, and just noticing the breath as it comes in through your nostril, and just breathe in and out, and just keeping that focus there. If that's doesn't feel right, you could also go to the abdomen as you breathe in and out, and noticing it as it rises, your inhalation and exhalation. After that, once you're pretty good with that, you can count the breaths. You can watch clouds go by. It's always a nice one. And noticing also with the clouds, thinking of your mind as a clear blue sky, and the clouds are thoughts. So don't get engaged in the thought. So there's so say you have a thought pops into your head, which always happens because that's what our brain does. We think. So a thought comes by, and you say, oh, I need bread. Well, that's fine. Just notice it and let it go, right? But if you start adding onto the grocery list, right, and you're having coffee and milk and pasta, then come back and re-anchor yourself to the breath. So breath and watching your thoughts as clouds. Even with young kids, bubbles, right? Placing little animals on their stomach. It's wonderful to see mindfulness being used in schools.
And just overall the impact of, when we're mindful, then we're more connected to ourselves. And then in turn, when we're more connected to ourselves, we're more connected to others. So can you talk a little bit about mindfulness in workplaces and kind of some of the work you've done or some of the impact that mindfulness has done for work environments?
Yes, I've been very lucky to bring it into schools and some workplaces. We know that, stress is, one of the greatest stressors, I guess, in the workplace. I think it's something like it's over $1.6 billion is loss of productivity because of stress, and people not knowing how to deal with that. Mindfulness has been proven through thousands of research pieces to reduce stress at work, sleep, anxiety. It's good for eating habits. You name it. It's a full broad spectrum of benefits for using mindfulness. So when we typically go in and maybe go to a place, we like to. So when I say we, so myself and my husband, Arunas and Tinnitus, so we have Mindful Solutions for Change, which works with companies, organizations, and personal coaching. We like to bring in some of the mindfulness practice, plus also some of the neuroscience, because again, people need to understand how it works. Stuff like talking about multitasking. How we think multitasking is this great thing, right? Oh, wow. I used to think it was great. I could, put something here and, unpack your groceries and wash the dishes and talk on the phone until, you find your socks in the freezer, right? It's going to fail. So we try to bring it into the workplace in a playful way, so it's not in a strict environment. They can play with it themselves. So again, learning about the negativity bias, learning about multitasking, creating positive mindsets, maybe doing some types of reframing, pre-framing exercises. If you have a difficult customer, like I said, difficult phone call, we have these cards that you would think of a quality to use and take that into the situation that you're going into. So that might be patience or kindness or forgiveness, or a quality that they might not think to rely on when they typically interact with somebody. So giving them a different lens to look through. So that's sort of a piece of it. What else? So we do some meditations. We know now that the new lens that they're looking at leadership are these, what are considered soft qualities, right? Which is having compassion in the workplace, the understanding, being able to cooperate with people. All of these things are critical, as equal to an education job experience. They're looking now, they've, expanded this as this is something important. I mean, Google, Harvard, all of these large corporations, they're General Mills, etc., are bringing in a mindfulness practice. It's allowing people to take a break, taking a 15-minute break to just go sit quietly away from, the busy activity at the workplace, allows you to go back and be stronger, and more present. It certainly helps with gossiping and conflict.
So just overall, if you look at the impact of stress and different work environments, and, stress is one of the biggest, like you said, $1.6 billion, right? And every industry and sector or schools, if you think of, with the schools and the amount of kids that are struggling with mental health at a really young age, which, and so they're not, whether there's stuff going on, they don't know how to quiet their mind. So just to think of the gift, naturally, I think when you see most children, they kind of know how to do that, but it's almost like they unlearn it. So it's almost like reacquainting them with that concept, because I think naturally, if I think of my son, I would look at him and I would see him so completely being in the moment. And then you could see as he started to be a little bit older, how he was just shifting out, because he was so much more conscious of everything. And then was the opposite of kind of when he was younger. And really, if you think about the claims that we're seeing for mental health, really, and stress being one of the biggest causes, whether it's anxiety and depression, whether it's biological or not, it's quite kind of the thing that I think most of us need to learn today to do well. And to your point, it need not be something that's really, really long in length. It could be as little as, let me try this for 5 minutes so I can look at the sky and clear my mind and let things pass by. But at first, would you agree that it's difficult if you've not done it, because you think you're doing it wrong? So with people that are having difficulty, what kind of words of guidance would you give them?
Yeah, it's funny, because when they first sit to meditate, sometimes the thoughts get worse, right? Busy, busy, busy mind. And they tend to want to blame it on the meditation. Okay, she made me sit here. And now I'm really, really bad, my mind. But if you think of it as driving down a highway, and you're in a car and you're going 120 miles an hour, okay, maybe not, because that's not the speed limit. You're going 100 and everyone around you is going 100. You really don't feel like you're moving, right? You're just kind of, oh yeah, driving, right? But then you get a flat tire and you pull over, and then all of a sudden you look up and all the cars are going zoom, 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 right? Just flying by you because you've stopped for that moment. So it's kind of like, that's what it feels like when you first start meditating. It's like, oh man, they're coming. And they're, for some people, they may want to quit, but I always advise them, don't. And don't, again, part of mindfulness is don't judge, because you're not always going to have a perfect sit. Although the idea is, once you're a little more familiar, is to always get up again a little earlier than you want to. So then you want to sit down again and sit quietly. So again, just understand that that's just the mind and nothing's wrong, I think, is the best thing. And the ability just to, like, say if they just start counting. So I would say, just count from 1 to 10. If your mind wanders, start back to 1 again. Use that as your anchor. Count 1 to 10. If it wanders, keep coming back. And part of that is knowing that we can always start over again. In anything, in the workplace, when we make a mistake, anything, we can always come back to a new beginning. And I think that's a powerful point of mindfulness too, because we always think this, this is over because, I did this one thing, but no, we can always start over again, start fresh.
Yeah, so companies that are having, which we know, like you said, if it's, as high as it is in reference to money's lost, for companies that are thinking about implementing mindfulness, what are some of the things that they should look into or consider to implement a mindfulness program?
It's really helpful to have mindfulness from the top down, that the leaders are doing it, and then they're leading by example. And, you know, once you've gone on a retreat or something, you'll come back and they'll be like, what's different about you? Did you do something with your hair? Like there's something, right? So definitely, if you can, I think, or everyone should be included in the opportunity of taking some mindfulness training. Just like you wouldn't ask one of your employees, I think, to teach Italian, give them a book and say, no, teach it. I don't think it's a great thing to just give someone a book on mindfulness and say, teach it. I think the person needs to know a little bit more. They need to be trained somewhere on mindfulness and have their own practice so that they really embody it and there's some authenticity. I know in school it won't pass the smell test with the kids. You know, if you're not really living it, you know,
Yes.
if you're coming in and you're yelling and screaming at the kids, it's not going to work. Or at work, like we know at work, and I was in the Army, so like we got yelled at all the time, right? And we were, I don't want to say fear driven, but it was always very important. We were doing follow orders, you know, especially you're out in the field. But I think in the workplace, that doesn't work when someone's hammering at you or humiliating you or something like that. That, you know, that old school, I want to call it. I know I had some teachers like that in elementary school going way back. Put you in the corner, put gum on your nose, something like that. I mean, that way of humiliating people just doesn't work anymore. So we have to have that mindset of equanimity and working with others, and that these are qualities of mindfulness. So I mean, there are, you know, having presence. I mean, and I don't know him off the top of my head, but John Kabat-Zinn, you know, he has the 7 qualities of mindfulness. So you know, it just really can transform you.
Mm-hmm.
And when it transforms you, it transforms your workplace. It transforms you at home, because at work you can't forget about home, and at home you can't forget about work. So you can't try to solve this on one side, right? People are stressed, they're worried, we have more going on in our lives right now than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if they do the 5 minutes, even if in the workplace they provide a space for them to just go and sit, but bringing someone in would be helpful, even as simple as, you know, ringing a bell, you know, just to be calm. The little tricks like pulling cards during a meeting. So everyone sets an intention before they start, an intention that's a quality to be kind or to be patient or to show respect, you know, and then it just keeps tumbling and carrying forward.
It sounds so simple, I think, because now it used to be kind of thought of as woo-woo kind of thing, right? But now people are recognizing with the levels of stress that we're seeing across the board. And of course, stress like gets defined in different ways: anxiety, depression. You know, we'll see a lot more people with sleeplessness, you know, lots of things are out of kilter. Like your point is, if I'm more relaxed or able to kind of, I call it say it's almost like an emotional release of indigestion in a way, of emotions, right? So if I can kind of sift it off and let it go as much as I can daily, then I'm able to focus more with a clear mind. But if I'm kind of, you know, packing it in, and then I try to kind of, you know, keep at that level, at some point, something's got to give. And you know, in our workplace today, you know, gone are the days with it's mostly physical. We know what we use. You and I, in our paths as keynote speakers and trainers and coaches, we're using our brain all the time. Well, guess what? Our brain's going to get tired and stressed, right? It needs a relaxation. And to the point that how do we learn how to do that? We have to go to people that do it all the time. They live it. They may have high-powered situations. They've been there, done that, but they actually embody that whole concept of relaxation. So I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing out there in the workplaces and schools more than ever. I think, to your point, start really, really young as something that's a given. But on the other end of it, with leadership, you know, we know that if we see our leader engaging in something that's positive, we're going to more than likely follow his guide. Here's her guide. But if they're, not following that, it's kind of, there's a less of an expectation that any of us should follow the guidance of our leader. So Sharon, I'm sure people probably want to learn more. They may have maybe events coming up for speaking, or they may want to reach out and potentially look at training in mindfulness. Where can they get a hold of you? And I'm sure people would love to reach out.
So they can get a hold of me at Mindful Solutions for Change. So that is the website. But I also offer that there's so much online, some wonderful programs that they are able to go on and download meditations, reflections, and that there's Mindfulness Hamilton, Mindfulness Toronto. But definitely if you're looking at something for corporations or and you want someone to come in, then that's certainly something we can do. So Mindful Solutions for Change, and the number's 905-818-7871. Yeah, we're really passionate. We love to go in and see big changes. We worked with one company for almost a year, just going in once or twice a month, and they were running a resilience program. And when they did an audit of all the participants, they said, what was the one most important piece of this work we've done all year? And they said it was bringing in the mindfulness instructors. So we were happy to hear that.
Oh, that's amazing stuff. Well, Sharon, a pleasure. Thanks so much. It really, makes me reflect on my own practice, and I know I do it and then I don't, and things like that, how important it is. And so for everyone listening, please reach out to Sharon if you have any needs. And I guess to the leaders or the teachers out there, just think that you are the one that people look up to. You are the one that we're looking to take your guide. So really if you've not tried it, really consider, like Sharon saying, going online and trying to start to even try it for 5 minutes here or there, and start to see if you can increase it. And our breath, to your point, keeps us present. Start there. That's really, really basic. And as you start to do that, it gets a little bit easier. So for anyone wanting more information on me, I can be reached at roxannederhodge.com. I'm a mental health and wellness specialist and a keynote speaker, trainer, and coach. So again, Sharon, thanks a lot for your time. And for everyone listening, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannederhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.